All right, welcome everyone to Designing User-Friendly Drupal Modules. My name's Clayton Dewey. I'm the product owner at Dev Collaborative. We're a web agency that designs and develops websites using Drupal and WordPress for higher education institutions, nonprofits, and other do-gooders in the world. About me, I might have messed up my slide transitions because I just added this today, but here we go. So I've got 3 kids. My youngest, Cam, just turned 15 this month. Ember, off to the very left, and Obsidian at the very front with the glasses, were born on the same day, August 7th, 4 years apart. And Ember's turning 17 and Obsidian's turning 21. Which is how old I was when I became his stepdad. So I am full on in midlife crisis mode now as a result of that. I play trombone in a punk band called Elegant Everyone. Might be related to the midlife crisis, who's to say. And I'm also a proud parent of Thumper, the guinea pig. And really, that's the highlight of the presentation. So if anyone wants to leave, they can. So I want to talk first. Actually, I want to get a sense of the audience and then dive into this concept of the cathedral and the bazaar. So I guess, just to get a sense for like how people relate to Drupal. And you can raise your hand for multiple of these audience groups, but raise your hand if you're like an author or editor, you're logging into a Drupal site, working with content. Okay, cool. About 5, 6. And then raise your hand if you're like a site builder. You're building sites in Drupal, you're using the user interface, you're installing modules, configuring modules. Okay, a handful, maybe. Okay, a little bit more. And then any developers, back-end or front-end, writing code. Okay, and of those, have any of you all contributed to a Drupal module before in any way? All right, and then does anyone maintain a module? Does anyone help maintain a module? 1, 2, you do. Okay, cool. Okay, good to get a sense of that. All right. And show of hands if you're familiar with this concept of the cathedral and the bazaar. Okay, great. Only a couple people. Sweet. So the Cathedral and the Bazaar was an essay that was written by an open source developer named Eric S. Raymond way back in 1997. And it was an observation of the kind of prevailing methodologies for designing and developing software. And on one side, you've got proprietary software championed by companies like Microsoft and Apple at that time. And especially Apple, where you could liken that model to a cathedral in which designers are kind of working behind closed doors, designing something in splendid isolation for the masses, like beautifully thought out, a lot of upfront planning, waterfall kind of style. And then compared that to open source software, where it's built out in the open, and likened it to a bazaar. So very bottom-up, very democratic, this flurry of activity, this marketplace of exchanges of services and ideas. And that essay is mostly a set of principles. So the first principle is every good work of software starts by scratching a developer's personal itch. You've got a problem you want to solve, and so you start writing some code to solve that problem. Another influential principle is principle number 6. Treating your users as co-developers is your least hassle route to rapid code improvement and effective debugging. And that's that very collaborative kind of spirit that bazaar embodies. And so the kind of ideal is something like this, right? There's a lot of people at this bazaar. There's a diversity of gender, of ethnicity, of age, of ideas, backgrounds, experiences. People are freely as equals exchanging ideas, services, goods, that sort of thing. Unfortunately, what oftentimes happens is that bazaar looks a little bit more like this, right? Like a scene from Silicon Valley. Really funny, fantastic show, some interesting commentary there. What and so if you're talking about scratching your own itch and you're hanging out at the bazaar, like, what do you get? You get like an itchy bazaar is kind of what you get. Or maybe a bazaar itch, That's not really the like industry standard term for this. People better know this process as meritocracy. And meritocracy is a system in which advancement is based on individual ability or achievement. And so in like the open source community, there's like historically been like a high value on like people, you're making decisions based on your merit. And back in 2008, Angie Byron wrote a really great blog post about this in Drupal and kind of describing the community philosophies that were at play that was driving the development of Drupal forward. And she pointed out that, action is gold, right? Like, lots of people, everyone's got an opinion, but as far as like which opinions float to the top, which ones get traction, is the people who actually like take the time to contribute to the project, right? Talk is cheap, action is gold. And so, a meritocracy. Ben Millison made a really good point, left a comment pointing out that like meritocracy's kind of got some problems to it, right? Like this concept of merit, it's a bit of a fuzzy word, like who has merit, when, how, why, how is that measured? And better like, and it can also end up reinforcing biases, reinforcing imbalances of power and privilege. And so a better word for it would be a do-ocracy, like the things that you're tangibly doing contributing to the project. To which Angie was like, yeah, good call. That's an awesome point. I love this term, do-ocracy. I've updated my blog post. And I love this because it's such a good example of the Drupal spirit and the community of like, somebody has an idea, they put out a blog post about it on their own website, maybe running off of Drupal. They allow comments, people chime in, and then they update their thinking and they update their language accordingly. So pretty cool. So, we went from meritocracy to do-ocracy. It's kind of like how things are done. And that picked up speed. Like the founder of Drupal, Dries, said Drupal is a do-ocracy, meaning the stuff that gets into Drupal 7 is the stuff that people like you actually worked on. This was said back in 2009. But unfortunately, we still end up with this kind of scenario a lot of the time. Like this is still the people doing the do-ocracy, and it's pretty limiting. And one of the many, many problems with this dynamic is that you end up with interfaces like this. Can anybody recognize what Drupal module this interface is taken from? Yes, Benji.
Looks like context.
It is context. And another thing that Drupal community loves to do is take a very commonly used word, name a module after it, and then nobody knows what you're talking about. But context is great. It's a super powerful module. It's super helpful. It's so frustrating to use. I was working with a front-end developer who had just started using Drupal, and he wanted to take this navigation block and move it up to the header. And so what did he do? He clicked on this crosshair and tried to drag it up to the header. It wouldn't work. He's like, okay, fine. I'll click this add button and add the navigation block to the header. Neither of those worked. This was Matt Webb again. So Matt calls me over and is like, Clayton, this module is broken. I'm trying to drag this thing up there and it's not working. And I'm like, oh, Matt, sweet Matt, poor Matt. No, it works as designed. What you got to do is you got to click this X over here to take the navigation out of this area, and then come over here and notice that there's all this nice white space sidebar. No, it's all contained in this tiny little window, and you got to use this little scroll bar to get here. And if you've ever worked with Drupal, there are many, many blocks in Drupal. So you're scrolling down there trying to find the navigation thing. You check the checkbox, and then you add it to the header. And what happens when you have interfaces like this, well, you get people angry. You get people confused. You get issues like this reported in the context issue queue. Totally confused by the UI. Wow. So this component user interface, there are 200 issues in the context issue queue in the category of user interface. 73 of which are still open. So if you're looking to contribute somewhere, that's an area. Although context has largely been deprecated, and yeah, there are other tools out there that do it better, thankfully. So, you know, this isn't news to a lot of us who have worked with Drupal. It can be a confusing tool, so I don't want to harp on it too much. So let's talk about what we can do about it. So yeah, so it's a problem, right? Drupal is built by developers for developers is kind of my theory there, and that do-ocracy. And we're trying to shift away from that as a project. Dries in 2022 at DrupalCon Portland announced an updated vision for Drupal, which is that Drupal is for ambitious site builders. So that person who is in the user interface, the person using context to try and place a navigation block in the header region. And the Drupal values and principles document has also kind of updated over the years. So we started as a meritocracy, right, evolved to a do-ocracy, and it's now what I would call collaborative, just borrowing directly from this text. And I mean, I work for a company with it in the name, so why not? That's a good word. So in the Drupal values and principles governance page, it says consensus-based decision-making is oftentimes a slow process, and it's not ideal. You end up with this situation where everyone is mostly happy, but no one is completely happy. In contrast, the collaborative decision-making process allows leaders to collect data from people, but still gives them the agency to make decisions, you know, to move things forward. And so how can we embody that collaborative decision-making process? So there's a few elements that I think is really helpful. So you know, if we're thinking of like the cathedral as a metaphor for proprietary software, the bazaar as one for open source, you know, I think mutual aid is a really good example or like metaphor for collaborative decision making. And I'll kind of go into why. Raise your hand if you're familiar with the concept of mutual aid. A couple people, yeah. So I can share some examples and define that. So some examples. Mutual aid really has been around for a long time as a concept and practice, but it really gained a lot of traction during the height of the pandemic, when people were organizing free distribution of food, of masks, of hand sanitizer. And so, you know, the way in which that is organized is around the concept of solidarity. It's around the concept that it's not that you don't have food or you don't have a mask because of some personal moral failing that we have to fix. It's because of a failure of the system itself. And so trying to build relationships of solidarity to meet our needs in the immediate term, but with a long-term vision of changing those systems so that those needs are met, you know, that everyone's needs are met. It's really high emphasis on relationship building and on centering people who are most marginalized and most in need. But also still bringing it back to like we all have something to share and we all have something that we can receive. So, all of that to say, now it's time for me to kind of share the story of how myself and my team brought these concepts of like mutual aid, of collaborative decision-making process into how we maintain a module. And that module is called the max length module. And what that does is, you see there is a character countdown message that's below this text field. So what max length does is it allows site builders to set a character limit on a text field. So in this case, 500 characters. And you can decide if that's a hard limit or a soft limit. And as you see, there's two messages there because there was a bug. The new administrative theme for Drupal came out. It's this nice, modern, clean, fresh administrative theme. And when it first came out, it caused this bug in the max length module. So what did I do? I scratched my own itch, right? Going back to that itchy bazaar approach. And luckily, somebody had written a patch. It might have even been you, Ben. I don't know. It was someone. And I tested the patch, and it was like, hey, it works. Yay. Back in September of 2020. What a time that was. Roscoe chimed in January of 2021 and said, hey, I tested this. Works like a charm. Thanks for the patch. Rico chimes in March. Hey, it's still working. Can we get this patch committed already? Please, someone, anyone? So I was like, I think this is a sign that maybe the maintainers of this module need some help. And we, at Dev Collaborative, we were looking for a module that we could contribute back to and maintain. So I reached out to the maintainers, and to their credit, like within 24 hours, they wrote back and were like, please, please, please help us. We are overcommitted. We're maintaining 10 other modules, and yes, we would love your help. So it's like, fantastic. So the very first thing I did as maintainer is commit that pesky bug. Ben was very happy about it. Called me a
hero of many.
Hero. I was honored. But it wasn't done there. The next thing I wanted to do was, okay, going back to that collaborative decision, or that collaborative process, is bringing in a couple of things from the product strategy world. So product strategy can be kind of encapsulated pretty well with this diagram. You start with a vision. What is the world that you want to see with this tool out there that you have? And defining a mission for yourself, having a strategy, so things like goals and objectives, plans, and a roadmap, right? And so we brought that to the MaxLink module. So we defined the vision. So yeah, imagine a world, in which the MaxLink module is helping website authors write concisely to better connect with their audiences and adhere to the character limits that is defined by the site's design. And with that, we also set up some values. So we wanted this to be helpful for authors. We wanted it to be intuitive for site builders, sustainable for site owners, and extendable for developers. So, casting our gaze beyond just the developer community and into these other audience groups. And then the other thing is incorporating a more explicit design process, right? Like any software project that exists is using some kind of design process. But unfortunately, in that itchy bazaar model, what that is oftentimes means is like a very implicit process in which developers are making design decisions that maybe they shouldn't be making. And so, a typical design process, there's lots of like different specific versions, but in general, empathize with your users, define the needs that they have, ideate over how you can meet those needs, prototype some solutions, and then test them out and rinse and repeat. And with all of that, there's a really great concept out there, and a whole network actually working on this called the Design Justice Network, which is like, hey, let's also take those design processes, but center people who are normally marginalized by design and use collaborative creative processes to address their most pressing needs. So let's walk through how we use that design process with the MaxLink module. So first we empathize. So there's three general audience groups that I had you all raise your hands around, right? Developers, site builders, and content authors. And there can be some overlap. And then there's also, you can also slice audiences with Drupal along kind of experience level. So people who are very new to Drupal, people who are familiar but are still in that learner mode, up to skilled, expert, and master. And the Drupal Association, this came out of the Drupal Association's own user research, and they concluded that the central focus of upcoming Drupal.org improvements will be the transition from that learner to skilled level. That's a difficult one to get to, and that's great. I love that. I fully support it because it really maps well to that vision of the site builder, because that's where a lot of the site builder persona lives, is between that learner and skilled set. So we did the same thing. We kind of prioritized the learner to skilled transition. So we wrote task scenarios for things that we want people to be able to do with the MaxLink module. And the first one, go into like the project browser initiative, is just discoverability. Like, how are people finding the max? Like, how are people finding a module to meet the need of setting a character limit? And so we watched people search in Google. How would they get to that project page and evaluate it? Setting a limit of characters on a body field, and we watched how it went. So I'm going to just share a couple clips of those usability testing sessions because I think they're really interesting. And now I'm like, can I speed it up?
I believe you go into extend.
And can I turn up?
To see modules. And what I'll do is I'll filter to see if it exists. Oh, look, it's here. It's installed, but it's not enabled. So I'm going to click the enable, and I'm going to click install.
I would consider a learner. She's like a.
And then I'm going to hold my breath.
Usually a project manager, so kind of.
So now I know it's installed. Usually I think there might be some place up here, but I see permissions, so I'm just going to take a peek and look at permissions.
And let me just pause.
And I'm.
So this is the task where she is setting a character limit on the body field of a content type. So she's just installed the module and she's gone to the permissions page first since enabling it. Because it's like the one link there.
Logged in right now as an admin, so I'm just gonna double check. So I see that max length is enabled for a developer. I'm gonna see if there's other settings in here though. I'm gonna click. No, that's it. So I think this is probably a set for now. Okay.
Cool.
I'm gonna take a peek at the content I have on the site. So I have a test page. And does the test page have fields? Just double checking. Okay, look, there's a body field.
So that's the field that she wants to set.
So I want to see if the body field has max length configured. So I am going to go to content types, basic page, manage fields. I'm going to go out to see a body field, so I'm going to click edit.
So this is a very logical place to expect it to be.
I'm going to scroll down and see if there's anything related to max length.
No.
Nothing here. Let me go to field settings. So I'm wondering if, I don't think this is max length. Set a soft limit of 100 characters. This is what I'm looking for. I don't think this is where the settings are. I'm going to go look up in the modules, maybe, in configuration. So system.
Also, reasonable
Basic
place
settings,
to
no.
look.
Content authoring.
For sure.
Maybe it might be under text formats and editors. I don't know. I guess. I don't think so.
Also reasonable place.
User interface. No. Development.
But it's not there.
Media.
You're so close. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna look again. Maybe I missed it, or it might not be here. Basic site settings, content authoring, entity link, editorially, text formats and editors. I'm gonna go in and see. Maybe it's here. I feel like this is an escape room. And like, like they know the answer to how to get me out of here, but they're not saying anything.
Yeah. And this is a very similar.
Max link. Is that it?
No,
Max
that's
length.
not. It's not it.
No. Max length.
Sorry, Aaron.
It's not. Oh.
No, it's not.
I wonder if that is part of the module though, because I do know that you can limit.
It's not past
I don't
Clayton.
think so.
Okay, this is not where it is.
Yeah.
I love the escape room analogy.
I'm just gonna go back here. Was there a setting, something that I missed here?
We're getting a little closer. Okay, so the help page. The help page is going to explain it, right?
Using the form display page, we can limit text field in text areas. Configure max length permissions, that's what I did. Okay, so using the form display. Okay, so I'm going to go back to content. I'm going to go back to structure. And I'm going to go back to content types. Oh, wait.
So close. The thing gets thrown up by manage form display.
Yeah,
Where is manage form display?
I'm going to do manage display. Manage. What does it say here? Form display page.
So close.
Okay. Let's see. body.
And imagine
The
if you
sigh
didn't
of
have
frustration.
the drop
With
down
text
menus
area
installed.
Right, totally. Yeah.
Max length.
You found it. The key to the escape room.
Yes!
Set a limit of 100 on a body field.
We did it. We found the max length.
Set a soft limit. Set a hard limit.
Now we get to dive into the
So
form.
it says a maximum number of characters in the field. So I'm guessing that's a soft limit, and truncating is going to force truncate. I think would be setting a hard limit.
Yep.
That's what I would think.
Yay! So, kind of painful to watch. That's the whole point of usability testing. And, you know, you could, I don't know if you know, like, with doing a usability test, right, you want to try not to intervene and, like, let people struggle through it. And it's so hard. But it's very illuminating to do that, to just let them get through it and, like, hear their mental models. So I have we have some like conclusions that we drew from that usability test. I just want to show one more that's a lot shorter. So Allie, again, like learner to skilled, setting a max length, but just kind of focusing on this part.
I'm reading the help text here. So if I get, for instance, if I wrote 1,001 characters, the truncate would stop it from putting in that 1,001 character and stop it at 1,000.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I would want to enable that. I think that would be really useful for the kind of people that I have who edit websites.
Uh-huh. Hold them to it.
That's right. That's right.
So the safe truncate HTML option. This is a fun one.
Use this option if the input field may contain an HTML and you want to exclude the HTML.
I'll show a zoomed up like
character count. This will
screenshot
also
of what
avoid
this
the
says,
validation
but
from core.
it's
So it looks
very
I don't
dense
understand what this means.
jargon.
Yeah.
And so Alex,
So I would leave
don't
that
know
one
this-
alone. I wouldn't touch it.
Yeah,
Cool.
It's like I'm scared of that. I'm
Is
not
that
gonna
so?
touch
Should I hit update now?
Uh,
Max length. I'll
it.
set.
So that's that one. I
10,000.
think we're pretty much. Oh yeah. Okay, so let's take a look at this help page. Oh yeah, I went too far. Max length creates a form property, max length, which in conjunction with the max length will enforce via JavaScript. Who is this written for? This is written for developers, by developers. I credit Aaron for being able to parse this and focus in on like managed form display. That's what was like the important piece of information there. And then here is the form. And so, yeah, so there's an option here, safe truncate HTML. First of all, force truncate, also very jargony. Like, why not just call it a hard limit?
But also, hold on, like, and literally when you like wrote all that stuff out, I'm like, this module is too simple. This is way overboard and like all of this user testing and all this stuff. And now I'm just like, but wait a second. Does force like if I write a 2,000 page glorious thing and the max length is 100 and I ignore the little JavaScript counter, will it delete my next my 1,900
No, because
characters
it
I save,
will-
or will it validate the
It
form?
will, well, it will prevent you from ever getting to that.
Oh,
If you
like
get
as you
to
type it, just
200,
deletes it
it'll
to the
stop at
JavaScript.
200.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a whole conversation.
so if I'm touch typing and not looking at the screen, it will delete my next
Yeah.
200 brilliant words.
Yeah. Well, you just will never see it. Yeah. It'll just stay stuck there. So safe truncate HTML means like if you check that box, it won't count HTML tags in the character count. If you don't check that box, if you have a word in bold, it'll count bracket, strong, close bracket as part of the character count. And as you saw with Aaron and Allie, both of them understandably left it alone because they were like, I don't know what that means. So kind of misconfigured, right? Because like 99% of the time you don't want to count HTML as part of your character limit count because that's not, I mean, yeah. So again, by developers, for developers.
Wow.
And so now we've empathized with our users. It's time to define their problems. So we collated, like, here are the changes that we could make, right? Improve the help page, etc. And guess how many so we found 14 usability issues when we ran usability tests. Guess how many were reported in the issue queue? Any wagers? 1, 4, 4 out of 14, 5. Literally none of them. Nobody had complained about the help page before. Nobody had complained about the force truncate language or the safe. And like to me, this was a huge aha, which is like, yeah, the issue queue is another tool in space that is built by developers for developers. Like they're fine, you know, like. So anyway, so we then ideated, you know, we went through that list of usability issues. We came up with ideas on how to improve them. For the more complex ways, we put out some polls on Twitter and Mastodon and Slack that nobody actually filled out, so that was kind of demoralizing. We asked for like feedback in the comments in the issue queue, which we did get, so that was great. And then something that we did that was really awesome that Benji helps run is there's a weekly Drupal usability meeting where you can bring any Drupal issue to that, like Drupal software issue that you want to improve. So I joined one of those meetings and we talked through, it might have been this screenshot actually, the permission behavior. Yeah, so that's a great resource. So then it's on to the prototyping phase, which, yeah, we didn't really do that. We just like dove right in and just fixed things and hoped that they worked out. So, you know, maintaining open source software. I mean, to our defense, there's like not a lot of great prototyping tools, resources out there. The previous session like was super inspiring in this way. So I took it upon myself to take like Drupal's Claro design system and put it into Penpot, which is like it's like Figma. It's like an open source alternative to Figma. And so now we've got like the fields and field sets and elements and everything. So I was able to mock up like a new max length form. But this was after the fact. We just improved it this way. So we put the max length settings into a field set, so they're all there related to each other. You can now have a different summary max length versus like the body field max length and a different countdown message for each. We renamed it to hard limit and used very plain language to explain what a hard limit does and what happens if you leave it unchecked. And then that safe truncate HTML we're like, please, someone, give me a scenario in which you want to count HTML tags in your character limit count. Anyone, no one could tell me why that's a good thing to ever do. So we're like, let's just do that by default and not have a checkbox that people get confused by. So that's what's happening. And then we tested. And the results have been really encouraging so far. So since we adopted the max length as maintainers, there's like 34% more Drupal sites that are using it since when we came on, which is awesome. We've done another round of usability tests where people are able to like find, well, I mean, it's still kind of like, we're kind of limited, like that's where that lives and that's where it should live, but the help page is much more helpful. And we've gotten some positive feedback from some guy named Dries, gave us a shout out. That was very appreciative, like this humble brag, you know, that they care about the details and getting it right for the max length. Imagine what they do with their clients. And yeah, it's true. We love like nerding out about usability issues and making things as easy to use as possible. And then like another one is, so there's another module that does the same thing but just for CK editor fields, called the CK editor word count module. And you know, someone started working on an upgrade to make it compatible with the new version of CK editor, and then was like, yeah, actually I just abandoned this because I'm just going to use max length instead. So I was like, well, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, our module is pretty good. So. But I would like for us to all imagine for a moment an alternate reality in which we hadn't taken a design, like applied a product strategy to this, or we hadn't taken like a more explicit design process and done the itchy bazaar methodology. Here is a form. This is like all real feature requests, and patches were even written to satisfy these new features, right? We had someone who was like, oh, can we also put a maximum number of lines in our fields? Configure that. Can we have an option to use the max length HTML property in some cases and in other cases not? Imagine if we hadn't rewritten the force truncate option, if we had included that safe HTML, right? Like this form would have just gotten more and more complicated if we had followed that do-ocracy. I mean, the people literally took the time to do that, and it could have been put into the module. But if we had done that, we would have taken a by developers for developers approach. So yeah, instead, we've got a nice, clean, easy to use by the community for the community interface. Here's the new help page with that managed form display in bold text, and we've also like written out full documentation that link links out to. Yeah, and you know, as I mentioned before, with the rinse and repeat with design, right? We're always learning, we're always ideating. So, still taking feature requests, fielding bug reports, having community discussions, did a round of usability tests. We haven't gotten as far as doing like interviews or surveys. I feel like we're maybe like reaching feature completeness with MaxLink. So, but for your projects, right? These are great ways to empathize and then come up with ideas for how to meet people's needs. And the last point is just like really evaluate these feature requests based on your strategy, your values. Don't be afraid to say no. So for example, we just a couple of weeks ago got this request. Can we have an option to enable max length automatically on any fields that have that like max length kind of developer value? And I was like, yeah, but no. I'm afraid that this is gonna just like add more complexity, and we've got these values of being intuitive for site builders and sustainable for site owners. But let me know what you think. And here was like, I totally agree, it shouldn't be enabled automatically. If you don't want to add a setting, I could write a contributed module for it. I was like, yes, that would be amazing. And so he did. And so we give it a shout out on our project page. We're like, hey, if you want max length and you want that character count on all of your text fields, enable a max length auto module. And there it is. And I think there's a great way for the Drupal community to lean into that modularity and kind of avoid, when it makes sense to avoid like these monolith modules that just have a configuration page like miles long. So in summary, right, adopting that collaborative decision-making process rather than the like itchy bazaar do-ocracy, where if you build it, yeah, sure, it gets in, and then you have a patchwork configuration page. Having a product strategy, having an explicit design process, and then just scaling up in the user experience design department yourself, or recruiting other people with that background and having them help out in the project. And so here are some resources on that. And I'll share the slides afterwards so people can dive in further. So yeah, thank you very much. Oh, and we can keep the conversation going. I'm on Mastodon, which is like an open source community-owned alternative to Twitter. I'm on Drupal.org. You can email us at hi@devcollaborative.com. Thank you very much. And I don't even know. How long is it? Are we at time? Do we have time for questions? 3:15. Yeah, but 2 minutes. 2 minutes for questions, if anyone has questions. So, yeah.
Coming soon in Drupal 10.2, the Help Topics module has been integrated into the Help module. So that's a great time to think about rewriting the help for your module.
Cool. Yeah.
So you'll be writing it in a Twig template rather than implementing in PHP code, pasting strings together in one help.
Okay, great. Yeah, that'll
you
be
want
nice.
to repeat that for the recording?
Yeah, so Drupal is coming out, the Help Topics module. It already exists, right? But it's becoming
Being
stable.
integrated with the standard help module.
Oh, integrated with the standard help module. Got it. Cool. Yeah, which will make it easier to create and maintain help pages. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, my question is more like people go to some place that's logical, and I really love action links as a capability in Drupal, and I just sort of wondered where you would draw the line. Like, it feels like adding an action link to like configure the maximum length for this field in the form display, like putting action link on the regular field settings to the form display. That seems excessive. Like, I wouldn't do that, but sort of where you think sort of the balance is, and if Drupal should have sort of like a like find related context user interface element, so that when you're close, you can click a help or something that gets you to the other places that might be there without quite the overhead of an action link, because there's so many dynamic parts where like you can't just give people a link to it, but maybe your module help page should like
maybe you can like dynamically go through all the content types, and here's the managed form display for each content. I didn't even thought of that.
It makes more sense to have the help in context and be like, somehow you can expand the help, and you know, even if you're 1 degree off, get there. So I'm just your thoughts on that.
I like that idea. I mean, I think that's like a specific like tactic or design pattern. So I think it's like based on context when not the module that you think it isn't use that module anymore. It's so confusing. I think in certain scenarios that would be helpful for sure. But that does give me think, because we're at a disadvantage with the max length module because so many modules do have a central configuration page, and once you enable it, you see that configuration link. So that's right. That throws people off when they use max length, because just the nature of it, you can't have a single configuration page. But maybe there is a creative way to do that.
Or maybe like the admin menu module has a search. You can search and find, match things on the menu system. If you could match things on the config pages across the modules, a similar, do the same search box or similar, that would also be really useful.
Yeah, that would be really cool. Yeah, because as you can see,
True module.
right, totally. Yeah.
Can you summarize those comments from the recording?
Oh yeah, thank you for reminding me to do that. Okay, so Ben had an
I was
idea.
close enough to do that.
Oh, you were, okay. So that was, and this tests my understanding of questions now too. So being able to somehow kind of surface, in this case, max length, when you're searching for a task, I guess. Could you repeat that idea actually?
Do you know the search I'm talking about? If you have
The admin search?
Menu, I think still a separate module.
Which is awesome, because instead of like scrolling through the menus, you just type what you're looking for, and it tells you what menu
It tells you
you're
what menu
looking
is
for.
on.
Yeah.
So same idea, except instead of searching in the menus, search in the config pages of all of the enabled modules.
Yeah, okay, so for the recording, it's like, right now you can search for an action, and if it's in the menu, then it'll show you where in the menu it is. But in this case, showing the configuration pages that match that search.
Configuration pages are in the menu, but for instance, what we're talking about, max length, is one section of the form display page. And so if you type in max length, like, could it actually show like form display, and then because max length is a heading inside the form display form, actually get the results in search? Yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah. And I mean, it's fun that we went down that specific problem space, like in the Q&A. But I mean, my observation is that even just having a vision statement and a set of values to start driving the purpose of certain projects forward, I think would help a lot. That's my like main thing, like championing that, and like having a design process, and like not just putting things in because developers wrote a patch for it, you know? So anyway, end of rant. All right, well, thank you everyone. Let you all finish your day up.